Dad slammed his hand on the lawyer's table and laughed. You, in this will, don't make me laugh. My brother smirked. Then the lawyer quietly said, before we continue, there's another document. My name is Lauren Whitaker. I'm 34 years old. I grew up in a middle-class family in Ohio, where how things looked mattered far more than how people actually treated each other. My father owned a small construction company, and from the time I was old enough to understand what pride meant, I understood that his version of it had a name. My brother's name, Dot. My brother was older. He was loud, confident, and everything my father wanted to see walking through the front door. I was the other one, the quiet one. The daughter who was supposed to stay in the background, help when asked, and never take up too much space. I became a technical writer for engineering companies. It was careful, detailed work that I was genuinely good at. My father called it typing manuals. Nobody reads. He said it at the dinner table. He said it in front of guests. He said it like it was funny. Family gatherings were never safe. There was always a comment about my salary, my apartment, my choices. Nothing I did was worth mentioning unless it was being mentioned as a joke. I wasn't chasing status. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I just wanted to be treated like I belonged in my own family. That was the whole ask. I wasn't rich or glamorous, but I had something they didn't expect. Years of being ignored taught me to watch carefully and remember everything. Every document, every conversation, every quiet warning from the one person in that family who actually saw me when my grandfather passed away. The whole family gathered at the lawyer's office. I walked in expecting tension. I had no idea how far they were planning to go. If you've ever been the person in your family that everyone underestimates, subscribe before this story goes any further. Drop a comment if someone has ever made you feel invisible in a room where you deserved a seat. Click hype before the real story begins, because what happens next is something they never saw coming. The lawyer's office smelled like old paper and wood polish. There were 6 chairs arranged around a long table, and the room felt smaller than it probably was. My father walked in first. He always walked in first. He sat at the head of the table before anyone suggested he should. My brother sat beside him, jacket pressed, already grinning like the meeting was a celebration. I sat near the far end with my hands folded and my face blank. My grandfather had been the only person in that family who treated me like I was worth something. He remembered my work. He asked questions about it. He listened when I talked. Losing him had been quietly devastating in a way I hadn't fully processed yet, but grief wasn't something my father made room for. Not that day. He started talking almost immediately, cutting across the lawyer mid-sentence to explain how the business assets would likely be distributed. He spoke like a man reviewing his own property. My brother laughed at something and leaned over. Lauren probably gets Grandpa's old cookbook or something. A few people smiled. I stared at the table. The lawyer, Mr. Bennett, tried to regain control of the room. He was a calm man, older, with reading glasses on a chain around his neck. He had worked with my grandfather for decades. My father interrupted him again. He said I had never contributed to the family. He said it plainly, like he was just correcting a factual error. Then he turned directly toward me. Let's be honest, he said. She's never made real money in her life. The room went quiet. Not the polite kind of quiet, the uncomfortable kind. I didn't respond. I kept my face still and my breathing steady. Mr. Bennett cleared his throat and reached for a second folder. His voice stayed professional, but his eyes moved carefully. Before we continue, he said, there is an additional document that must also be addressed. No one at that table knew what that meant yet, but something in my chest went very, very calm. My father wasted no time establishing that the real assets were already handled. He explained, with obvious satisfaction, that the ownership of the construction company had been transferred to him privately several years earlier. The will reading, he said, was basically a formality. He used that word twice. Formality. My brother nodded along. He glanced at me and said I should probably stick to writing manuals. Mr. Bennett did not laugh. My father continued. He turned to the subject of my career again, this time in front of the lawyer, as though Mr. Bennett needed to understand the full picture before anyone made any decisions. He said I had wasted my education. He said I had never understood business. He said it all in a smooth, reasonable tone, like he was being helpful. I had heard versions of this at every holiday dinner for the past 10 years. The settings changed, the words barely did. Then came the part that shifted from humiliation into something else entirely. My father slid a document across the table, toward me. He explained it was a simple form. He said signing it would help everyone avoid unnecessary legal complications down the line. He framed it as a courtesy, something a reasonable person would do without making a fuss. Mr. Bennett looked up from his papers. His voice was quiet but precise. Ms. Whitaker, you are under no obligation to sign anything today. I looked at the document, then I looked at my father. His expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened. My brother picked up a pen from the table and slid it toward me with a small smile. Come on, sis, he said. Make it official. I didn't reach for it. Something my grandfather had told me months before he died was sitting at the back of my mind, and I let it stay there. I didn't panic. I didn't cry. For the first time in that room, I didn't feel hurt. I felt ready. During the last year of his life, my grandfather had asked me to help him organize old company records. He said his files were a disaster and that he trusted me to handle them carefully. I spent weeks going through it all, digitizing folders, sorting emails, cataloging old contracts. I was thorough because that's how I work. That's always how I've worked. And in the middle of that process, I found things that didn't add up. Transactions that moved money in directions that didn't match the company records. Payments that had no clear documentation. Patterns that, taken individually, might mean nothing, but together told a story. I brought my concerns to my grandfather quietly. I didn't want to accuse anyone of anything. I just asked if he had noticed. He had noticed. He looked at me for a long moment and said, keep copies, just in case. So I did. I stored everything securely and told no one, not a single person. What they didn't know was that every arrogant word they said that day was digging their own hole deeper. My grandfather also told me, near the end, that he had prepared a second legal document. He said it would only come forward under specific circumstances. He didn't explain exactly what those circumstances were. He didn't need to. Sitting in that office while my father smiled and my brother played with a pen, I understood now what those circumstances looked like. I sat still. I let them talk. I waited. Mr. Bennett was not a man who showed a lot of emotion, but I had been watching him all morning, and I could see the discomfort he was working to keep professional. During a short break, he stepped near me while my father and brother were speaking to each other across the room. He spoke quietly. Do you remember helping your grandfather with the company archives? He asked. I said yes. He didn't say much more than that, but he confirmed that my grandfather had raised serious concerns about how the business had been managed. He told me there was another document prepared under very specific instructions, and that it was only meant to be introduced if certain things happened during this meeting. I didn't ask him to explain further. I already understood. Back at the table, my father had moved on to discussing how assets would be divided between himself and my brother. He was describing square footage. My brother was talking about a truck he wanted to buy. I sat and listened. The clock on the wall behind Mr. Bennett ticked slowly. The sound of it was the only steady thing in that room. Then Mr. Bennett returned to the table with a thicker folder than the one he had been using before. He set it down without rushing. He straightened his glasses. Before anyone signs anything, he said, we need to review this document your grandfather prepared. My father's expression shifted, just slightly, just enough. Mr. Bennett placed a two-page document on the table. My grandfather had written it with clear language and careful detail. It explained that in the final years of his life, he had developed serious concerns about financial misconduct connected to the management of the family business. The document stated that if Lauren Whitaker was denied her rightful place in the estate, the lawyer was instructed to initiate a full independent financial audit of all company accounts going back 7 years. My father's face went hard. He called the accusation ridiculous. He said my grandfather had been confused near the end. He used the word confused twice, each time a little louder. Mr. Bennett did not raise his voice. He explained that my grandfather had already begun the audit process through a separate firm before he passed. The document was signed. It was notarized. It was completely valid. There was also a clause inside it. It granted me temporary oversight authority during the investigation period. My father started talking faster. My brother had gone very quiet. I opened my laptop. I had the files, every folder I had digitized, every transaction I had flagged and backed up on a separate drive. I turned the screen so Mr. Bennett could see clearly. My father looked at me. You're bluffing, he said. No, I said. I'm just organized. The records I presented matched exactly what the auditors had already identified as points of concern. Mr. Bennett confirmed it out loud. He said it calmly, without drama, the way people speak when the facts are simply sitting there on the table. My brother leaned back in his chair. He didn't say anything. He didn't look at anyone. My father began explaining that everything was a misunderstanding, that numbers could be interpreted in different ways, that no one had intended anything improper. His voice had changed. The confidence was still there, but underneath it was something thinner now. Mr. Bennett reminded him that the document had been prepared by my grandfather with full legal awareness and had been signed and notarized well before his passing. The room felt different. The air felt different. I looked at my father and I said, quietly and without anger, Grandpa believed in fairness. Today, we're finally honoring that. He didn't respond. The meeting ended with Mr. Bennett formally initiating a review of the business finances. I was assigned a legal role overseeing the process for the duration of the investigation. My father left the office without looking at me. He was furious. But underneath the fury, he was shaken, and I could see it. My brother walked past me without making eye contact, the first time in years. I stepped outside into the cold air and stood there for a moment. What I felt wasn't triumph. It was something quieter than that, something closer to relief. My grandfather hadn't done this to punish anyone. He believed in fairness. He believed in accountability. He had simply made sure that the truth had somewhere to go. I thought about all the years I had spent being small in rooms where I should have had a voice, all the dinners where I smiled through comments designed to make me feel worthless. All the ways being dismissed had taught me, without anyone meaning it to, how to watch and wait and hold things carefully. The day my father said I'd never see a dime was the day he realized he'd never controlled the whole story. If you've ever sat in a room where your family treated your voice like it didn't count, I want to hear from you. Drop your story in the comments. You don't have to have a lawyer's office moment for it to matter. Sometimes the story is just about surviving the table. Subscribe if you want to be part of a community where those stories get heard. And if this one reached you, click hype to help it find someone else who needs it today. Thank you for staying with me through this. If this story resonated, leave a like and tell me what part hit hardest in the comments. Every story shared in this space helps someone else feel a little less alone in what they've been through. Click hype before you go. Help this reach the people who need it most.